Welcome to issue 237 of Critical Encounters, a podcast about Marvel Champions, a living card game by Fantasy Flight Games. Here, we take a good look at that most critical piece of the game, the encounter sets. We'll discuss those poorly understood characters, unfairly labeled villains, and their various plans to shape humanity and benefit the planet, as well as those so-called heroes intent on thwarting them. I'm one of your hosts, Daniel, and joining me tonight is Steve. Hello, sir.
How's it going?
Oh, wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. And we're also joined by Mike.
Oh, yeah. I'm unstoppable tonight.
Oh, that's good to hear. You must be our storyteller of the evening.
See, Steve, I had to do it this time.
Yeah, I'm glad someone did. Yeah, good.
I was waiting for you to pick it up first, but...
You didn't really ask me, like, a good enough response. I couldn't say...
You couldn't have worked something in? Let's just do time stuff and start over. Hey, Steve, how are you tonight? What's going on? What are you thinking? What are the varieties of things I could be asking you to generate the thing you want to say?
I'm just going to keep pushing us forward.
Okay.
We're not going to stop. We're not going backwards. We're just going to blitz on. Let's drive forward. How's it going?
Full steam ahead, you're saying?
Okay. Yes. Full steam ahead. That's right.
All right, fine.
I will answer your last question with another question. Daniel?
Yeah.
What's on your mind tonight?
Oh, an email. An email is on my mind tonight. Got another one here pulled from the archives. This comes from Jim Roberts. Have we heard that name before, Steve?
We have not. This is a new email from a new person.
Well, thank you for reaching out, Jim Roberts. That is very nice of you. And what is especially nice is what he has to say. First of all, great podcast. I play Champions solo, and I love how the game manages to catch the tone of so many classic Marvel villains with a relatively small number of mechanics. And I appreciate the care you take to bring that out, while also being incredibly goofy about it. Love the dating shows, love the Pawn Stars episode, love the Christmas episodes, which I just finished, actually. I'm a long way off from getting caught up on the whole podcast, but you said that you'll gladly take help with research and stuff, and I'm a pretty big comic book nerd, and specifically an X-Men/mutant nerd. If I can help in any way, let me know and keep up with the podcast. Jim. Ooh.
I think we need to contact Jim.
I think, we'll be reaching out, Jim.
Yeah.
I feel like we have a few mutants and X people to go, do we not?
We have an entire box of mutant people still.
A whole cycle.
All right, take your pick, Jim.
I've been going back in the archives because I was trying to find when we last talked about Juggernaut, and it was a while ago. Like, I feel like a third of our podcasts are now on mutants.
Oh, geez.
Well, there's been...
So Jim could still be really far away from being caught up.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we did 4 non-mutant boxes in the core. Now we've done 2 mutant boxes, but yeah. So,
okay.
With another one to go.
But I think I can safely tell Jim right now that we'll reach out to him. We love our lore masters, our lore master minions. Absolutely.
And now I'm self-conscious because I'm giving the backstory, and I most certainly didn't procrastinate and binge watch the first season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. instead of doing my research.
Mike.
That was a hard series to put down, for sure.
That first season is gold.
Yeah, I think I did the same thing. Like, I was hooked from second one on that show. But we're really not here to talk about S.H.I.E.L.D. and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or anything like that. Mike, as our lore person today, what are you telling our story about?
Oh my goodness. So we are talking about Juggernaut, and boy oh boy, I mean, last week I lamented how I could barely touch the iceberg that is Black Tom Cassidy. I mean, Juggernaut is exactly the same. My goodness. Lucky for me, I don't have to.
Oh, what do you mean?
Because we actually had an esteemed guest on show number 180 who did the Juggernaut lore for us.
Well, that was nice of them.
Yeah,
I know.
But was his lore more focused on how Juggernaut and Colossus interact, or was it really all of Juggernaut?
He talked about the avatar of Cyttorak, and you know what? Why don't you guys just load up issue 180 and catch up? Don't worry. We'll wait.
Welcome to issue 180 of Critical Encounters, a podcast about Marvel Champions, a living card game by Fantasy Flight Games. Here we take a good look at the most critical piece of the game, the encounter sets. That's not right. What about the hero cards? Let's do the origin. All right, cool. So, Juggernaut is the type of villain that you would expect to emerge from his era. He popped up in very early X-Men in the 60s. And he shows up and he beats up a bunch of children. That's what he's always done.
Oh.
Yeah, so you guys are probably a big fan of that.
No.
All right, welcome back.
Funny, I didn't even remember that at all.
I know.
Wow.
It was a long time ago,
180.
see?
Yeah.
It's been a bit.
That's almost a year. So,
Yeah.
okay.
I didn't want to just rehash such a wonderfully told story from such
Sure.
an esteemed guest who is not paying me under the table to say that.
Yeah.
So-
That was good. All right.
But just like the Juggernaut scenario in our game, I'm going to add a little twist. Last week, I went over Black Tom Cassidy's backstory, and as promised, this week we're talking about the relationship between Black Tom and Juggernaut. So continuing on the tales of last week, I did mention that Black Tom first appears in X-Men number 101, published in 1976. He actually appears alongside the Juggernaut, so they were a thing right from the beginning of his story. Now, that's the beginning of Black Tom's story. If you'll recall, Juggernaut was first published in X-Men number 12 in 1965. So he's got a good decade on Black Tom. Now, since this thing with Black Tom was published in the 70s, the setup is absolutely ridiculous. It's the old school comic thing, right? And I know a lot of our listeners really love the old-timey comics. I find them so hard to read. Okay, so in this story, Jean Grey has been overcome by the Phoenix and causes the X-Men shuttle to crash land near JFK Airport. The X-Men recover Jean Grey, but she's in a coma, and everyone is really upset. Lots of emotions in the room. So Professor X orders them all to take a vacation, and wouldn't you know it, but Sean Cassidy, aka the Banshee, has just inherited Cassidy Keep. So they go there. And unbeknownst to them, Black Tom, who, as you recall, is Sean Cassidy's cousin, and Juggernaut have turned the Keep into their headquarters for some nefarious business. So again, I didn't delve too far because these comics I find kind of cringy. The Nightcrawler Storm interactions are particularly hard to handle, and the usual exposition is awful. In case you haven't guessed, my muscular friend and I are the villains of this piece. I'm Black Tom Cassidy. And I, students of Charles Xavier, my dearly hated stepbrother, wink, am the Juggernaut. Show, don't tell! Okay.
The first thing anyone says in a writer's workshop, Mike.
I know.
You're
Okay,
right.
so I promise I'm not going to go full Balakov on this one. But there's some weird plot holes. Like how Black Tom and Juggernaut were supposedly hired to kill the X-Men, but they had no idea that the X-Men were coming to Cassidy Keep for vacation. They just happened to be there. Anyway, the long and short of it is that the fight features Black Tom hitting people with his shillelagh, while Juggernaut dominates the fight in his usual brutish way, and Nightcrawler gets abducted by leprechauns in the middle of this.
What?
Wait,
Leprechauns.
can you repeat that?
Just it's what I said.
I feel like you said leprechauns.
Yeah, and they drag him away, and then the fight continues. No, I did not follow up on that.
Why not? Why would you not follow up on that part?
You let the leprechaun go? Wow.
Let the whole series go. Okay. So the
Okay.
point is they were a thing from the beginning, right? And they were BFFs. They're always together. The backstory, as we come to later, is that when Black Tom went to prison, he meets up with Juggernaut. I tried to find a comic where they met, but it seems like this was only told in very small flashbacks, which is too bad because I would have loved to see that interaction. So if anyone out there, and I'm going to say this a few times throughout the story, if anyone out there can point me towards any specific comics where he meets Black Tom, I would love to see it. It's actually remarkably hard to find very specific points in time using the Marvel app, because it tries to drive you towards series or you know what I mean, like drive you towards certain things, and if you try to find a specific piece that's not tied to a big event, it's really difficult, especially since they like to do crossovers all the time, and you might be trying to follow a story lead, and then unbeknownst to you, it's actually in another comic where the ending is, so kind of difficult.
Yeah, I've noticed that too.
Yeah. And the more they write about these characters that everyone loves, the more you see that. Okay, so the point is they're BFFs for a while. They got each other's back. They're great. And that holds true for Black Tom's first era, where he's just hitting people with a shillelagh, and his power, I will remind you, is that he can channel energy through his stick and hit people with little explosions. I mentioned that in era 2, he starts becoming a tree and starts to go a little crazy with all that.
Yep.
So that, funnily enough, strains their relationship a little bit. And there's a little bit of I don't know if this was intentional from the start, or whether this was a retcon, or whether this was planned ahead of time. I have no idea, but I'm going to lay it out the way the story wants you to see things, and that is that Black Tom gets more and more tree-like over time, and there's a point where he takes over Cassidy Keep, and he's just got vines everywhere, and he's acting almost like a spider, where he's just catching people and holding them and killing them. Like he is vicious at this point. He is just killing people left and right. He is absolutely out of his mind. He's I think he's tried to kill his brother's friends and lawyer a few times. So Juggernaut actually puts out an SOS call to the X-Men.
Oh.
Apparently they have their direct line. He has a direct line or something. And they come and they land and they see the Juggernaut. And what's the first thing they do?
They attack him.
They start a fight. Of course
they
because
do.
you shoot
They're
first and ask questions later, right?
Wow,
And,
heroes.
Yeah, heroes. But it is really funny. Like Bobby shoots a stream of ice at him and Juggernaut hits it out of the way. And then he just looks at him. Has that ever worked? Like, really good. Juggernaut has some really good lines, for being a brute and all. Really enjoyed that. So the shtick there is that Black Tom has lost his mind, and Juggernaut teams up with the X-Men to try to get him to come to his senses. And Juggernaut is then rescued and ends up going to the mansion, and hanging around the mansion eventually becomes part of the X-Men.
Okay.
Oh, interesting.
What is unclear is when the writers decided that that was a ruse or not. Because later on, when Black Tom is leading that iteration of the Brotherhood of Mutants, he lets loose that this was a plan all along to pretend to go crazy so that he could get a man on the inside of the X-Men, so that when Black Tom attacks, Juggernaut can take them down from the inside.
Oh, and maybe the original intent was not that. Maybe they discovered that as they were writing it. Maybe they needed to just, this will work. Yeah.
Perhaps.
Okay.
So he is in like full-on tree form when this attack happens. When he's trying to attack the mansion with the Brotherhood, he looks more like an ant, like Treebeard ant. It's odd. Okay, but just before we get to that, I want to talk about Juggernaut's first days in the mansion, because he is a fish out of water. He is the odd duck, right? He's a villain. He's got this traumatic backstory, and he just doesn't fit in, right? But this school has a lot of kids, and one of these kids is Sammy Squid Boy. Actually, Sammy Paré. He's called Squid Boy.
All right, that's what I thought you said.
Yeah, he looks like a fish.
Sure, I just thought that if that was his last name, it was a little on the nose.
A little, and you would put it past them?
No, actually, not really.
All right, so Sammy is a fish boy. He can breathe underwater. That's his thing. And he is bullied relentlessly at school. This kid gets the worst of it. He gets rocks thrown at him. He's called a freak. How a kid could live like that, I don't know. And they go through some dark things with this guy. He's got a gun in his treehouse, and he is plotting out how to take vengeance on the kids at school and then end his own life. Like this is 3 years after Columbine at best. It was a really ballsy storyline. But before he can do that, Charles Xavier comes to the house because he had set up a meeting with his mom to, hey, we're going to take your mutant kid and take him to a mutant school. So he's taken away from there, and they try to integrate him into the mutant community. But this kid, I mean, he's shaken, right? He's
sure. Jeez.
Self-esteem issues are, just a small piece of the whole puzzle. And he latches on to Juggernaut because, he sees this magnificent brute. I mean, when this kid first hears about Charles Xavier and his mind powers, he's like, can you melt brains? Because he wants the power to melt brains. He wants to destroy his enemies. This is a kid who's being bullied all his life. That's what he wants. So he sees the Juggernaut, and he's, oh my gosh, this guy, I want to be like him. No one's going to pick on me now. Now, Juggernaut, he's not really a mentor figure, and he doesn't care much for this kid, but this kid just keeps hanging around, right? And he asked him, he's like, what are you doing here? He's like, I don't know. He's like, I feel I don't like these people. I hurt inside. Maybe sometimes I feel like inside I'm a villain like you. And Juggernaut's like, that's what you think? That I'm a villain? I don't know. I did what I had to do. what I thought was the right thing for me. Nobody thinks they're a villain. Other people make you a villain. Xavier made me a villain, and it's his fault my father died. My father. I tried to make him pay for that, and I'm the villain. So you start to see... This is a lovely storyline, by the way, for seeing Juggernaut's, internal struggles. He eventually goes back to his old house where he grew up, and this kid's tagging along too. And he's just, you see these visions of, his father basically blaming this kid for absolutely everything that's gone wrong in his life. And Juggernaut is remembering all of this and puts on his armor and just starts rampaging through the house. He tears the thing apart in a fit of rage. And, the kid is just sitting there watching all of this. I want to read from this. He sees this house collapse. He's like, I just want to know what you got against this house. He's like, more than you can ever imagine, kid. Like what? I waited this long. Least you could do is fill me in. Here, I brought root beer. So spill about the place. It ain't the place, kid. It's what it represents. You were right. I've been blaming other people for my mistakes the same way my dad blamed other people. Blamed me for his. It's time I stopped blaming and started appreciating. I mean, look at you and me. 2 poor kids with no friends, no future, no hope. And because of Xavier, we're going to live in a mansion. Ching ching. And they drink root beer. So it's a lovely little story. And that's where Juggernaut starts to see things through a different lens. So Black Tom sets up to attack the mansion. And in tow is Nocturne. Nocturne is related to the whole Nightcrawler. I don't know how he's related to Nightcrawler exactly, but he's in that family. I think she's his daughter in another dimension or something. I'm sure someone will correct me. So Juggernaut actually stumbles upon this meeting because they're outside the mansion waiting to attack. And I think at this point, if I'm understanding correctly, is that Nocturne's kind of a mole on the enemy side, and she's like, wait a second. And then Juggernaut grabs Nocturne, pulls her away, beats her, pretends to kill her, but doesn't. And I think what's happened is he's saying, shut up, get out. Because he's actually switched sides at this point. He is now working for Team X-Men. So okay. Juggernaut gets back and he's like, okay, we're gonna do this attack. And then who walks up? But Sammy Squid Boy. And he's appalled. He's like, what are you doing? What are you doing with him? Like, have you just been lying this whole time? And this kid I can't believe you're doing this. Black Tom vines the kid, breaks his spine, breaks his neck.
Oh my God.
And Juggernaut.
What's Juggernaut do about that?
He goes over, he's like, Sammy, and Sammy looks at him and says, I hate you. Those were his last words. He breaks Black Tom limb from limb. He just tears him apart. And at this point, Tom is his tree, where, if you recall, he can regenerate himself from a splinter, so he's not actually dead. But yeah, he gets absolutely massacred. Juggernaut goes into a rage. Huge fight ensues. The X-Men, the Brotherhood, everything goes absolutely mad. The way it ends is they bring out this other mutant whose power is he's got a black hole in his head or something.
Well, I'm sorry, like a space black hole or just sort of a black hole?
No, like a space black hole. He doesn't know what happens when people are sucked in, but he takes off his hat, and the Juggernaut actually sacrifices himself. He corrals the bad guys. He says, don't worry about me, I'll handle it, just do it. And this guy takes off his metal helmet that's containing this black hole, and they disappear. It turns out they go to the Mojoverse.
Of course.
That's how you get there.
Yeah, through this black hole. And they do come back. Black Tom betrays... They say Black Tom betrays Juggernaut, but I think their relationship is a little rocky at this point anyways. He sells out Juggernaut to get home himself, and Juggernaut ends up stuck in Mojo World for a bit longer. But he eventually comes back and joins a whole series of superhero teams. He's part of Excalibur. He's part of the X-Men. They do kind of reboot him later after the whole multiverse thing, where he has a couple adventures with Black Tom. But for the large part, he's actually on the good team for a while, which is weird because we're talking about doing a 2-parter on a villain, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of odd. So where is he now? He is on Krakoa. Black Tom is there too. Black Tom is currently becoming one with the island. Yep, they're all there, all the mutants.
Everybody's there.
It's the put away old rivalries, right? All mutant kind can come here. And while Black Tom is more with the X-Force team, Juggernaut is with the X-Men Corps.
Okay.
And they're not really hanging out, but they're there. And yeah, that's the story I came up with.
Nice.
Oh, it's brilliant.
It's wild stuff. And again, I feel like I did not do this justice because there's so many stories about this guy. But I felt that was a very very poignant piece to pick at.
Yeah, it's nice to take a look at different parts of it, right? We, like you said, we had the origin story and stuff like that, and seeing his humanity and how he interacts when somebody like this kid calls him a villain, and what does he really think, and his own self-reflection on that, and then betrayal from a best friend. I'm waiting for Daniel over here to stab me in the back, but
Oh,
well, only after
Never
he kills you, Mike.
will never
so.
happen.
Okay.
So yeah, so I apologize that it's not the villainy that you would expect from this, but you did get some humanity, and this show is about those so-called villains.
Yeah, we want to know what makes him tick.
That's right. That is absolutely right. Now, beautiful story aside, though, Steve, I mean, we still have a job to do.
We do have a job to do. We're going to have to talk about some cards. So let's look at Juggernaut scenario. It comes in the next evolution box. It is the third scenario. They suggest Black Tom Cassidy modular, which seems very thematic. It has 18 total cards, 13 by title. Tonight we're going to talk about a bunch of the setup cards. Mike, do you want to tell us about the Juggernaut?
All right. The Juggernaut. Feels like a while since I've read a villain card. Okay, this is a standard villain with three levels. The first level, villain, of course, 1 scheme, 2 attack with an asterisk. He is brute traded, and that asterisk says Juggernaut gets +1 attack for each momentum counter here. When revealed, place 1 momentum counter here. Give Juggernaut a tough status card. And he has a whopping 18 hit points per player, which I think is pretty big for level 1.
It's pretty high for level 1, yeah.
Yeah.
This got to be the most, isn't it?
On a level 1?
I think there's a 20 somewhere, but yeah.
And so he really starts the game, Mike, at a 1-3, correct?
Oh,
yes.
yeah.
Because,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, wow. All right.
On his level 2 side, he gets a bump to his attack. He is now 1 scheme, 3 attack. He has the same asterisk. And when revealed, place 1 momentum counter here. If Juggernaut Exposed is in play, flip it. Otherwise, give Juggernaut a tough status card. We'll talk about that in a bit. But he's got his... If his helmet is off, he's putting his helmet back on. He's gearing back up. And if you haven't done that, well, he's tough. Sorry.
Yeah.
Should have done your homework, people. And he's got 21 hit points per player. And his level 3 version, he gets the usual boost to everything. He's got 2 scheme, 4 attack, +1 attack for each counter here. When revealed, search the encounter deck and discard pile for Head of Steam and reveal it. If Juggernaut Exposes in play, flip it. Otherwise, give Juggernaut a tough status card.
Wow.
Yikes.
Yeah.
There's lots here. Oh, yes, and 25 hit points per player.
That's getting into the 3 digits on the dial.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've hit 100 in a 4-player game. That's pretty
Wow.
cool.
Don't see that
Mojo
much.
has that, though, doesn't he? I think he might have been the only other one.
So Ronan the Accuser level 3 has 25, but Ronan the Accuser only has 14 at level 1.
Oh, wow.
So Juggernaut,
Okay.
yeah.
So Juggernaut's got to be the
Pretty high.
highest number 1. Okay.
Recall that they wanted Mojo to have the highest numbers possible.
I thought Mojo, they wanted him so that you didn't have enough
Tokens for
tokens or any kind of tokens
Yeah.
for the scenario.
He also has 25 at level 3. And Mojo's level 1 is 16. So yeah, Juggernaut is...
Far and away.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so he's not scheming, right? He has a 2 at his best. Fine, that makes sense. He's not scheming for much. He's effectively a 3, 4, 5 for his attacks.
Yep.
You know, if you don't do anything, he's tough on a lot of these, which makes it, a little tougher. And he gets to bring out cards and do stuff like that. So that's cool. But I think a big piece of this, both his lore and this game, is this helmet of his. So I think we need to talk about the helmet before we talk about anything
agree.
else.
I absolutely agree.
Well, then Daniel, why don't you tell us about his hat?
I will tell you about his dome.
Yes,
It is such
his
a
chrome
bizarre-
dome. He's a chrome dome. Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
so much about this helmet is just bizarre. It's like someone cut a bowling ball in half and just stuck it on his head. I don't know. So weird. Anyway,
It was cool in the 70s.
Well, I think that way the impact at the top of the helmet is comes down and around and hits that whole circumference that around his shoulders. It's like the Pantheon there, the dome, all the weight gets pushed down and around instead of one single point. If he just had like a Magneto helmet on, he'd ram into something and crack the top of his skull. But in
No, I
this
think
way,
you're right.
all
Okay.
the force is spread out down around
get
his
Got it. So
Sidorakian
now
shoulders.
science matters.
Yeah,
Got it.
way
Science matters with his magic
Okay.
gem that gives him his abilities.
Perfect.
Yeah.
You know what also reminds me? I don't know if you remember, Steve, you might be old enough for this. Remember the Fat Albert cartoon?
Hey, it's Fat Albert.
Back in the day? And the guy with the
mask.
knit cap that he put over his head? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kind of reminds me of that look, too.
It does.
Anyway, that may have dated us, Steve. So let me tell you about Juggernaut's helmet. It is an attachment, armor traded, permanent, attached to Juggernaut. Juggernaut gains stalwart and his attacks gain overkill. Whew. As a hero action, you can spend 3 resources of the same type. Remove each momentum counter from Juggernaut and flip this card. And that will be flipped into something that's already been referenced, but my goodness.
Yeah.
So he starts it at an extra attack and overkill and stalwart.
Yeah,
This guy
and
is
tough.
legit.
He's tough.
Yeah. Let's
Ooh.
read the other half of it. And then,
Yeah. So you flip this card once you spend those 3 resources, and you find what, Steve?
Juggernaut is exposed, so it's Juggernaut exposed. It has the scheme plus scheme, but it's a star. So it's also permanent, attached to Juggernaut. Juggernaut takes 1 additional damage from each card with a printed mental resource, which is probably the easily forgotten item in this set.
Yeah.
The scheme star says forced response after Juggernaut schemes, put 1 momentum counter on Juggernaut and flip this card. So, yes, he's not a schemer, right? His stats are pretty low because he's taking a moment to put his hat back on. He's got to screw his helmet on and build up some momentum as well. So he gets that stat boost. He's going to be stalwart again. He's going to be overkill again, and he's going to be coming at you with that helmet. So,
So I love, like many bully brutes, he is kind of susceptible to nerds.
yes.
Yeah, I like it.
I think I picture things like, and this is maybe an analogy here, but you can, Rhino would charge at Spider-Man, who would say something funny and jump out of the way, and then Rhino would hit the wall, right? So it's sort of like the same thing here. You can trick him because he's not, his power is in his bruteness, not his brainness. I guess.
He is not an intellectual giant.
Right.
Okay. So you could conceivably keep him exposed for a long time if you never flip to hero, or I never flip away from hero, right? And you never draw the he schemes card.
Right. Yeah, advance or dastardly deeds. Is that the standard 3 version? Whichever one it is. Yeah, if you get the encounter card that he schemes, he's going to flip it over. So, but now that his helmet's off, he is exposed. You can stun and confuse him. So if he gets confused and he does draw an advance, he doesn't actually confuse, so his helmet doesn't go back on. So that's a weakness that he has. Yeah. You can't try to stun and confuse him while the helmet's on.
I played this once in 2-player, and the rest has all been solo. And I feel like the difference between solo and 4-player is massive here. Because turn 1 in solo, spend 3 resources. Get the damn helmet off.
Absolutely.
And then you're good. Because he's not going to be scheming all that much if you stay in hero form. Like I said, that 3 cards, but you're not drawing through them all the time. Whereas not only are you drawing more cards with 4-player, but 4-player, someone is always in alter ego. And so you're always going to be flipping that helmet back, and it becomes more of a just keep the counters down as opposed to keep the helmet off.
You have to work as a team in like a 3 or 4-player game and be like, I need to flip. So when do we do this? Can we knock his helmet off just so we can do extra damage to him? Because we know he's going to flip. He's going to flip on the first player's turn, so he's going to have his helmet on for the other 3 attacks. Like, you got to time who it is that's going to make him scheme. You kind of always want the last player to be the one that's flipped into alter ego if you're trying to take advantage of poor Juggernaut. Kane Marco, right? Is that his name? Kane?
That's his name, Kane Marco. Yeah, I should have mentioned that at the top, hey?
Yeah. Has got a name.
His name is not Jugster.
Jugster. You know, he also has a scheme, so maybe I should tell us about the scheme before we go any more. We haven't even talked about his scheme yet. Okay, so he is also known as the Unstoppable Juggernaut. 1A, contents, Juggernaut 1 and 2, 2 and 3 for expert. So we're going to play with Juggernaut, Hope Summers, standard encounter sets, and one modular encounter set. They suggest Black Tom Cassidy. With the setup, attach Juggernaut's helmet to Juggernaut. Put Hope Summers into play under the first player's control. We've got a couple cards there. Then you're going to flip it over to 1B. It starts at 1 per player, goes up by 1 per player, and maxes out at 7 per player with a little tiny star. So here we go, main scheme. This is the fun part, I think, of his scheme. Forced interrupt. When this scheme would be completed, instead do each of the following. And there's 4 steps. Remove all threat from here. If Juggernaut Exposed is in play, flip it. Place 1 momentum counter on the Juggernaut. Juggernaut attacks each player in player order, even if they are in alter ego form.
Oh.
Yeah. So if you let the scheme, like in a solo game or whatever it is, you let the scheme advance, you do not lose by the main scheme advancing. It doesn't say players lose the game. It's just wipes the threat out, he puts his helmet back on, he gets a momentum counter, and he overkill attacks everybody at the table, regardless of what form they're in. So, yeah. So those people that flip to alter ego to heal up have to have somebody help defend for them. But if it's an ally, it's got overkill, so they're going to be taking damage anyways. So you know, that's fun. Huh. You only lose this game as a hero if Juggernaut pummels you into the dirt. Sort of. Right?
Yeah.
Sort of. Because there is an alternate loss condition in this one.
I've played this one twice. And both of them were kind of on my own on Octagon just to sort of see how it worked and such. And is there kind of a design flaw here? I feel like this scheme isn't going to advance because you're always in hero form and you can deal with the threat. And then once he's exposed, like you never have to flip. I don't know. Like I really feel like you can cheese this one.
You say you never have to flip, but he's still like attacking for 3 in a boost. And he's got cards in his deck that we're going to look at. You're going to take damage. I guess
that's also why he has 21 hit points in level 1, right?
Oh, Daniel, are you playing one of my protection decks where you don't get hit?
Yeah. No, I mean, but it just seems...
No, I've heard a lot of people talk. He's not super easy. You have to get rid of that helmet.
Which basically is a whole turn. So,
yeah, 3 resources of the same type. So
yeah, that's the trick.
You got to have it.
Right. You have to get him flipped in order to survive. But then you're going to start taking damage, and so you got to be careful because like 7 threat is not much, right? It's going up by 1 per player. You got to be making sure you thwart that down because if he does get 1 scheme in, 1 advance, you know, he can push it over, and then he's coming at you again. So that's the second attack, you know, that turn or whatever, an attack out of turn kind of thing. So
I really want to play this as our next 3-player game.
Daniel, all you have to do is join me on a Tuesday night, any Tuesday night.
Any Tuesday, and you'll play this one?
Sure, let's do it.
Okay.
Let's do it tonight, Daniel.
Let's do it. Wait, did I just promise something?
It wouldn't be the first time.
Yeah.
Daniel's promises are trying to surpass the unofficial critical encounters house rules.
Yeah. If we had the time, you'd do everything you promised, I'm sure. So there is this alternate loss condition, which I think we're going to wait till next week to talk about, because there's a little bit more lore we want to talk about, and that kind of goes along with it because there is another modular set other than Juggernaut, other than Black Tom, that we have to play with. So,
okay.
We'll just tease that they have false hope.
Oh, yes. And there is a question out there. People might wonder, hey, Juggernaut level 1 has 3 momentum counters, and I just defeated him. What do I do with those momentum counters? What do you think, Daniel? What do you do with them?
Don't all counters and all cards stay on the villain?
Yep, they carry right on over, so that doesn't help you any. Yep.
You want to get rid of those counters, folks? You take his helmet off.
Right.
That's it. That is it.
All right, well, do we have more to say, or are we going to save it for next week?
Don't we usually say our final thoughts, after the second
week.
episode of these?
Yeah, we usually do.
We'll wait on that.
Mike, who's telling stories next week? You or Steve?
Steve.
Yay! I hope he knows it.
All right, folks. What's up with these leprechauns?
Yeah.
Email us at criticalencounterspod@gmail.com. We are Critical Encounters on Facebook, and you can find our YouTube, Twitch, or Patreon by searching for Critical Encounters Podcast. And on Discord, we are Vardane, Big Fun Loaf, and Wandering 2.
If you like our show, tell your friends. If you don't like our show, tell your enemies. Juggernaut, take us out.
Ain't nothing, ain't nobody that can beat me.
Jump around.
Jump up, and get down.
Okay, no, let's not get... Daniel has a different song to do.